When she was 17, Samra Zafar was forced into an abusive marriage, which she escaped years later. Since then, her powerful story of vulnerability, hope, and resilience has captivated audiences across Canada and beyond. Her book, A Good Wife, became a national bestseller and is now being adapted for television. Samra is the recipient of the Top 25 Canadian Immigrant Award and was also awarded 100 Most Powerful Women status by the Women's Executive Network, recognizing women for their incredible achievements and inspiring future generations. Samra speaks to audiences in corporate, education, and nonprofit sectors on a variety of topics, including leadership, resilience, mental health, and human rights. It's my pleasure to welcome Samra.
Oh my gosh, I just choked up so many times as you were speaking, Zena, and it just brought back a lot as well, hit very, very close to home. And when I came here this afternoon, I'd sort of had some idea what I'm going to talk about, and as I heard Zena speak, I pretty much changed everything that I was going to talk about. No, and I just want to thank you for that, because you coming up and speaking like that really encouraged me to be more vulnerable in what I'm going to say. So I was 17. I was actually 16 years old when I was doing my math homework in my bedroom in Abu Dhabi, and my mom came into my room and said, "There's a marriage proposal. The boy lives in Canada. His family seems very progressive, and we're thinking of getting you married off to him." A week later, his family came to our home, and I remember carrying the tea tray and putting it on the table, and it seemed like the most important thing about me was how I stirred the sugar in the teacup. That's it. That's all that mattered. Or how I smiled, or how tall I was, because I'm quite tall and he's very tall, so they would look so great in pictures. That's the whole premise of the marriage. And I protested in my own way, and I was not very happy about it, and tried to say, no, I don't want to do this. I had nightmares because I was one of those girls, even though all my friends and cousins around me would often dream about bangles and wedding gowns and things, and I was always the one who wanted to go to Harvard and change the world and just make a difference. So I never thought this would be happening to me. And now that it was almost surreal, and I had nightmares, and I had a lot of I don't want to do this, but then my parents and everybody would say, no, this is the right thing. This is what girls should do and strive for. And all my friends would say, oh, you're so lucky. You're the first girl among us that's getting married. How can you turn this down? And I didn't want to be that bad girl who turned something down that is supposed to be such a gift, right? So I silenced myself, and I told myself that if everybody around me is saying that this is the right thing for me, then it must be. So I played small, and I went along with it. And just after my 17th birthday, I found myself sitting in a big grand banquet hall decked up in red and gold beside this man who was a virtual stranger, 11 years older than me, and was my new husband. And just after my 18th birthday, I arrived in this country as his bride. I didn't have any idea about what birth control is. No one talked to me about it. And it was something that was hush-hush and taboo. I became pregnant right away, so I was a mother at the age of 18. And when I came here to Canada, I was lost, and I was scared, and I was apprehensive and nervous, but I was also filled with a little bit of hope that I'll be able to go to school, because his family had promised my family that they'd send me to school and university. I hadn't even finished high school at that time. So I came here with the hope that, yes, I'll be able to go to school. And one day when my husband was in a bit of a good mood, he took me to the local high school in Mississauga where we lived, T.L. Kennedy. Any Mississaugites over here will know what I'm talking about. So he took me to the school, and the principal looked at me, and I was visibly quite pregnant, and with this much older looking man, and she kind of put two and two together, and she said, you will not fit in here, given your situation. you won't fit into the student body. So here's a number that you can call. And she had this mix of like sympathy and pity and almost feeling really sorry for me on her face. And I remember just feeling like, you know, where do I belong? You know, so she gave me this number to call. When I called them, the number was for Independent Learning Center. The person on the other end of the line who picked up said, "So how old are you?" And I said, "I'm 18. And he's like, "So why aren't you in school?" And at that time in Ontario, we used to have grade 13s, so OACs. So I said, "Well, it's kind of complicated. I can't really go to regular school." And he said, "Well, most of the kids your age who are doing their high school through us instead of regular high school are kids who are in prison for whatever reason." And I found myself saying, yeah, it's pretty much the same situation here. Because it really was. I was not allowed to go out of the house, make friends, have any independence, even call my parents. I was told that I was useless, worthless, good for nothing, called bad words every single day. And when you hear that on a daily basis, and it wasn't just him, it was also his parents, we were living in a joint family, and when you hear that on a daily basis, especially as young as I was, I started to internalize it and believe it. That if my husband, who claims to love me, is calling me all these things, then it must be true, right? So I started to really believe that there is something inherently wrong with me as a person, that I don't deserve to be respected and treated with kindness. And not every day was bad. There were also moments of, you know, glimmers of hope, such as, you know, he would buy me he would bring a Burger King thing for me in the night once in a while, or get me a strawberry milkshake, and kind of like these little consolation prizes that I would get for you know, tolerating what was inflicted upon me. And those things were, yeah, he loves me. Of course he loved me. He got me Burger King last night, or he got me, you know, he let me call my parents last week. So of course he cares about me. And that's sort of the way I kept myself going. And it was a very, very dark time, because there were times when, especially when, you know, he would kick me for no reason, or I would just go ask him for, "Do you want a cup of tea, you know, chai or something?" And he would just throw something at me, whatever was in his hand. And he would tell me, like, "BITCH, go away." And I would just not understand what caused this anger. And when I would call my mother, and she would say, "Just find out what makes him angry and avoid doing that." And I said, "Mom, I don't even understand what makes him angry. Like, the same thing that makes him happy one week, the next week, the very same thing that I do just infuriates him. So I don't know what to do." And I felt like there's some kind of magic thing that I'm missing, some secret to being a good wife that keeps eluding me. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't climb up to that pedestal of being a good wife, a good mother, a good daughter-in-law. There was this one time when the only place I was allowed to go outside of the house was take my young daughter, she was 1.5 years old at that time, to the local Ontario Early Years Centre where she could play with other kids and mingle and stuff. So I used to actually really feel proud of myself driving, you know, taking her stroller and going there, and the 5-10 minute walk that it was. I felt like, oh my gosh, I have independence, I'm a strong person. And one day coming back from there, she started asking me to get her a donut, because there was a Tim Hortons in that same plaza. And I had, you know, I was very, very sure that I had slipped a toonie into my purse, because I never had any money on me. He said, "You don't need money. What do you need money for? You don't go anywhere on your own." So I would still, you know, sometimes find a toonie or a loonie lying around in the house, and I would squirrel it away. So I knew that, I'm sure I have a toonie. I put it in my purse yesterday. And I walked to the Tim Hortons, got in line. I was feeling really proud that, you know, what a good mom I am. I'm trying to buy a Sprinkles donut for my daughter. And I ordered the donut, the lady gave it to her, and I looked in my purse, and I couldn't find the toonie. And I turned my purse upside down, and I just couldn't find it. And I remember how my palms got sweaty, my face just reddened, and I was just experiencing such a deep level of shame and humiliation that I started panicking, and you know, I was just like, no, wait, I can see it, I can try to find it, and I'm trying to find it, and I couldn't find it. And then a man behind me kindly said, "Ma'am, can I buy you a coffee?" And I looked behind him, and so another thing that my husband and his family had done was like instill this fear in my head that the big bad world is so cruel that if you go talk to any stranger ever, they're going to molest you or kill you or something else, because that's what abusers do. They try to isolate the victim. So I was so afraid of this man who was just simply offering a little token of kindness that I thought, like, what's his ulterior motive? Like, what does he need? And then he just smiled kindly, like, can I buy you a coffee? And I said, no, I don't need coffee. I just wanted to buy a donut for my daughter. So he said, okay, let me buy that for her. And at first I turned to my daughter, to just take the donut from her and give it back. But she had already bitten into it, so I couldn't do that. So he kindly paid for the donut, and I got out of the Tim's and I sat on the bench outside, and I just cried uncontrollably because I felt so powerless and so pathetic and just so hopeless. That, is this my life? Is this, like, how can I ever be worthy of any kind of love, respect, or acceptance if I can't even buy a $2 donut for my daughter? If I can't even have the little bit of dignity. And there was a time when I was at home and my mother-in-law was cooking, and I opened the fridge to take something out. She had made gulab jamuns, and it was like in this big bowl of a big bowl with a lid on it, but she hadn't shut the lid in properly. So when I took it out, I caught the lid, but the whole thing spilled, and all the gulab jamuns were on the floor in the kitchen. And she started, oh my God, there's a dawat today, and there are people coming for dinner. What did you do? And suddenly, like, I panic, and I'm like, oh my God, please, please, please. I hope he's not home. But obviously he was home. I heard his footsteps coming down, and he just struck me across the face, and he said to his mother, I'll say it in Urdu, Sali ki chutiya pakad ke isko mare. Meaning that just grab her by the braid and beat her up. And I was so scared that she will do that. But thankfully she didn't. I don't know what stopped her. Thankfully she didn't. But this was my life. And every day I would wake up just praying that it would be a dull day. It would be an uneventful day, a day where nothing happened. I didn't want any kindness or love. I just didn't want to be abused. And I didn't even know what to call it then. I thought, yes, it is all my fault. Obviously, I'm the one who spilled the gulab jamun, right? I'm the one who made him angry. I'm the one who didn't anticipate what he wanted at that time, or didn't wake up early enough, or didn't make lunch for him properly, or all of that. It was all my fault. And I truly believed and internalized that for many years. But the one thing, even during those dark days, when there were times when I didn't want to even live, there were times when I prayed for death in namaz. But even during those days, there was this little voice in my head that said, I want to go to school. Maybe there's a little chance that I can make something happen. And in some moments of giving myself hope and pep talks, I would stand in front of a mirror with a piece of paper in my hand like this and practice my graduation speech that I would give one day, when there was no hope of ever even being able to go to school. So I ended up calling the Independent Learning Center and ordering these courses. And the whole day I would do my chores, keep my parents-in-law happy, do whatever I could to make them happy or him happy, and take care of my child. And then at night I would go into my room and I would take out my books and I would study. And those few hours every night, thankfully we didn't sleep together, so he used to have his own bedroom because he didn't want the baby to keep him up at night, which served well for me because I could just study and do my thing. And those few hours were like my escape time. And I got permission to do those courses as long as I stayed at home like a good wife should and not go to regular school and be shameless and outside. So I finished all my courses through distance learning. It took me 5 years to finish the 6 OACs, grade 13 credits that I needed. At that time, I applied to university. I got in to both University of Toronto and York. And I was then told there's no useless money to pay for your silly little hobbies. I couldn't get OSAP because OSAP looks at household income, and his income was above that threshold. And he just bought a new car, and OSAP said, well, that's your family decision. We can't do anything about it. I said, that's not a family decision. I'm not part of that decision. I need to get money to be able to go to school. And they said, well, if you were separated, we'd give you the money. I said, but in order to separate, I first need to get myself on the ground. So I was kind of caught in this rock and a hard place. Like, what do? I'm trapped. And at that same time in my life, my father got really sick. So I was in Pakistan for my sister's wedding when my dad actually had developed massive kidney failure and he died. And my husband was in Toronto, but he flew to Pakistan, to Karachi, the next day after my dad died. And the first thing he told me to do was to have sex with him, because it was my duty as a wife, and I would be scorned and go to hellfire if I didn't do that. And I remember it was the day after my dad died. The only thing I could remember was his dead body. And this was told that it was if I didn't comply, I would burn in hellfire. And these are things that, were like the everyday occurrence. And the very next day after that, I was in a bedroom with my mom and my husband, and I refused to go back with him to Canada. And I told my mom knew what was going on, and I said, Mom, I just don't want to go back, please. I'll clean toilets. I will, do whatever it takes. I will sit here and I will, tutor kids. I will study. I will get a job. Just don't send me back. And he then came into the room and he's like, look at your daughter. She's refusing to go back where she belongs. And he hit me in front of my mom, slapped me 3 or 4 times across my head, and stormed out. And I went and sat right by my mom's feet and crying. And I said to her, Mom, please don't send me back. And she said, you have to go back. I can't take your responsibility because your father's no more. I have 2 other daughters because we have 4 sisters. So I'm the eldest. And 1 sister got married and she still had 2 to marry off. So I was sent back to him, to Canada. In that same house, living in the basement. I was now pregnant with another kid. And everybody told me, just have another baby, everything will be okay. So at that time, I think that was like my rock bottom that I'd hit. When you hit rock bottom, there's no way to go but up. It was sort of like that pivotal time in my life where I then started thinking, if I'm ever going to be able to go to school, university, I need to pay for it myself. So I started to think about ways I could make money at home. I couldn't go out and get a job. And one day, as I was in the local No Frills with my mother-in-law, there was this community board which had this ad for babysitting services. And I thought to myself, whoa, well, I can do that. I can take care of kids. I have 2 of my own. So I made some flyers for babysitting, and I went around the neighborhood and stuck them on little mailboxes and, those traffic lights and all those pillars and stuff. And I got a couple of calls, and then the Kijiji was just rolling out at that point, so I started putting ads online, and I started getting clients. And the first time I got a kid, he was 1 year old, and the lady paid me $300 for the entire month. And I just felt so empowered that I could make money. And then I got more kids and I built a referral base. So in the next few months, I was able to build a little home-based business running a daycare. And I got my mother-in-law involved in it too and gave her some money so that she would actually be involved in the process and wouldn't put roadblocks in my way. And then similarly, like I did it was like small wins for me. I told my mother-in-law, let's take driving lessons together. I got my driver's license that way, and then got a car, and then got a cell phone because I needed them for daycare and all of that stuff. So I established little moments of independence, and all my money would be taken away from me. I would, it was, this month mortgage is short, so can you put I'll put $1,000 in there. This month this is short, put $2,000 in there. So all the money would be taken away, but I would still stash away like a little bit, just $200, $300 on the side every single month to save a little nest egg that I needed for my first year tuition fee as a university student. And I think I got like $2,500 or something squirreled away. And it took me 3 or 4 years to do that. So finally, when I was 26 years old, after 9 years of marriage and 2 children, my daughters at that time were 7 and 2, I applied again to university. I got in, and I put my foot down that I'm going to school. And I had already anticipated what kind of roadblocks they would throw my way. So who's going to take care of the kids? Well, my older was in school, and my younger one, I would take her with me, or I would structure her nap time in a way. I'm just going to take one course, evening course, just once a week. I just knew that if nothing else, I just had to get started. So reluctantly, I was allowed to take one course. It was Monday night, 7 to 9 p.m., Economics 100. And I was given strict instructions. Don't talk to anybody. Don't make any friends. Don't raise your hand in class. Don't ask questions. Don't answer questions. In other words, be invisible. And I really thought that he had spies on campus that are watching me, and they will report back to him. So I was absolutely on my best behavior because I didn't want to jeopardize my chances of going to school. So I would, completely be invisible, sit in the corner of the class, never engage or never mingle, except for the very first class. I actually got there half an hour early and just sat in the middle of the empty lecture hall and just cried for half an hour, thinking, oh my God, I'm actually in school. It's actually happening. And then I just tried to be invisible. And every time somebody would try to talk to me, my self-esteem was so low that the dialogue in my head was, no, this person's going to find out sooner or later that I'm just scum at the bottom of someone's shoe. I'm not worthy of this. And they're going to, find that out about me, how bad I am. So I'm not even going to engage. So I never used to talk to anyone, never made any friends. And there were still some people who showed me some moments of kindness. And then something interesting happened. We had our first ever midterm for that course, like our test. And I was probably the only, or maybe one of few students in the entire about 700 kids or students in that course that scored 100% on that test. So the prof decided to announce our names in class. So, and he knew me by name because I'd been to his office hours a couple times. So he looked at me because I couldn't even pretend that it wasn't me. So I had to stand up. And then, you know how everyone just kind of looks at you when you're like standing up, and they all looked at me. And then suddenly after the class, hey, wow, how did you solve that question? That was so difficult. You're genius. Like, let's grab chicken wings tomorrow at the student pub. They're half price. Or let's grab coffee at the Starbucks. Let's study together. Do you want to join our study group? And suddenly people were treating me for the very first time in my life with kindness and respect and dignity for the very things that I was being ridiculed at home for. My intelligence, my goals, my individuality, just me. Not the box I fit into, not the role I served as a wife, as a mother and a daughter-in-law, just me as a girl, as a woman, as Samra. And I started to gain confidence. I'm like, maybe the world isn't so bad. Maybe people are actually good at heart. It's not like I'm gonna be chewed up and spat out on the side of the road. And I started to, enjoy my class, and I started to make friends, and I started to, actually speak up and raise my hand and ask questions and answer questions and feel really proud when I did a great job on tests and stuff. And then one day, and then I would go home after that and be treated with ridicule and insult and assault and humiliation, and I wouldn't understand why. Who am I? Am I this rock star who gets all this recognition and respect at school? Or am I this person who's just not even worthy of the least amount of love or respect? So one day, as I was lost in these thoughts, I came across this sign on campus which had a bunch of questions on it. Do you feel intimidated, like you've lost your voice, like you can't go on, like you are living in fear? And I answered yes to all of those questions. Come in and make an appointment. We're here for you. It was the Health and Counseling Center, and it sort of spoke to me. It was as if something's calling me in. So I went in and I made an appointment, and it's the first time I was sitting across from a counselor a few days later, and the floodgates opened, and I started saying, can you tell me what's wrong with me? Maybe if I cook better food, or wash the clothes better, or keep the baby quieter at night, or wake up early, or sleep early, or whatever. Like, what do I need to do in order to be respected? Or if this is normal, because everyone tells me it's normal, then why is there this voice in my head that says, No, it's not okay. Like, why can't I be okay with it? And she heard me go on and on for an hour. And she said, Samra, it's not your fault. This was the first time anyone ever said that to me. It's not your fault. No matter what you do not deserve to be abused. And it's the first time I heard the word abuse. Like, what do you mean abuse? Like, what is that? And then she started showing me, the power wheel, the cycle of abuse and violence and all those things, and pointing me towards research and articles and books to read. And I saw myself in all of them. And I'm like, how do you know this is happening to me? Like, are you following me around or something? And I learned that I'm not the only person it happens to. This is something that happens to millions and millions of women and girls around the world in some way, shape, or form, including our community. And it just pained me. And I also knew that there's a generational cycle. My father was abusive to my mom, and I'd seen that, and I'd normalized that in my marriage, and I could put that two and two together. I did not want my daughters to grow up thinking that it was okay to be treated this way just because you're girls. So one day, as I was standing in front of a mirror, although I did try to make it work, I was like, still tried to fight back. I thought, maybe if I take him to counseling, it'll change. But no, it didn't. It made it worse. And until at a point where I was afraid for my life, because one day he was almost very, very close to killing me. And he had his hands around my neck, and he was about to just squeeze my windpipe, and I somehow managed to get away. I kicked him, I shoved him, and I just took my car keys, went into my minivan, drove around the neighborhood to find a quiet spot, called Assaulted Women's Helpline, and just made some kind of a little escape plan. And as I was standing in front of the mirror with a bruise on my face, I talked to myself that I have to leave, instead of reaching for my makeup to cover it up as I normally would. And it wasn't easy to leave. He sold the house from under me. He promised me that he'd co-sign a lease for a condo, so I wouldn't have to worry about it and everything, but he went back on his promise. He put us out on the street, pretty much. Luckily, I was a student at University of Toronto, Mississauga, and they gave me emergency housing on campus. It was a tiny apartment, from this big mansion of a house in Heartland, Mississauga. I went to this little shabby, tiny 2-bedroom student housing apartment, no AC. It was summer, it was July of 2011. The ugliest looking green carpet you can imagine. But it was mine, and it was the first time that I felt safe at home. I didn't even have money for movers. I actually packed all my belongings in garbage bags, and it took me 5 or 6 days to move, multiple trips a day to move all my stuff. And I moved into this place, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have any family in Canada. The very few friends I had from university didn't know my situation. And the family that I did know in Canada, his family, they all abandoned me. No one picked up my phone. No one came to my aid. And I was just lost and alone and feeling absolutely hopeless. Luckily, I was also part of the university community, which did come to my aid. I got that little housing, this little unit on campus housing, and I told them that I don't have money right now for rent. They said, don't worry about it. Pay us when your OSAP comes in, because now you'd get OSAP that you're separated. I eventually did report him, but then I was afraid, and my mom, everybody told me, no, don't report him. What you mean you're gonna send your husband to jail? This is such a bad thing to do. And I took back my testimony so that he would not get any of that punishment. I didn't even know what child support was or anything. I didn't know how to get a lawyer. I had a legal aid lawyer who just turned out to completely not do anything for me, and then I eventually sold some of my gold jewelry that I'd managed to squirrel away, that I got at my wedding, just to pay for a lawyer to be able to get some kind of child support going. I picked up 5 on-campus jobs. I was working as a TA. I was working as a research assistant. I did night shifts at the student center selling bus tickets and movie tickets to students. I was working at the office of the dean as a support worker for first-year students. And I also found another secret way of making money on campus, to sell homemade biryani to students. And I love cooking, so I started doing that. And that's also another way I made some friends. And those same people became my community and my family. That when I did have those dark days and I felt like I couldn't go on anymore, they would show up at my door with ice cream and say, okay, let's just all drown our sorrows in sugar. We'll be fine. You got this. We're with you. And my daughters became my biggest rocks. There were times when I felt, what am I doing? My entire family stopped talking to me. My mom said, we don't want to tell anybody in Pakistan that you're getting divorced. It's so shameful. And so no one came to my aid. I wasn't allowed to talk about it. But those friends came to my aid. Those people at the university, the professors who spent office hours trying to motivate me and encourage me. My daughters, in fact, there was times when I felt like maybe everybody's right. What am I thinking? This isn't gonna work. Maybe I should just listen to everyone and go back. And my daughter would say, Mom, if you go back now, it will be worse now because he'll take revenge that you left in the first place. So I kept going. And every day I felt like giving up. I looked at my daughters and I knew that I have to give them a better life. So one day at a time, 1 month at a time, and I just put one foot in the front of the other. And eventually, in my final year, like 2 years later, when I was in 4th year, I graduated as the top student in the entire university. Thank you. I was the winner of 17 awards and scholarships, which is a record at U of T. And there's this one particular award at university, which is the John Moss Award, which goes to the only one person out of all 3 campuses combined every year who's the top student, and it pays about 20,000 or so towards your master's. So I was the first mature student and very proudly the first Pakistani to win that. And when I won that award, it was very empowering, and I loved the recognition, and the money certainly helped a lot. But the biggest thing that award gave me was validation, that I was not crazy. When I was thinking that there is something to do with my holding my paper in front of the mirror and practicing that acceptance speech. I was not wrong when I chose to believe in my dreams. I was not a criminal and selfish when I chose to study and not give up on what I wanted to do. And I was not shameless because I chose to stand up for my self-respect. And I wanted to shout and scream from rooftops at the top of my lungs to all the women out there that you deserve better. We do not need to hide bits and pieces of ourselves in order to be accepted and respected and loved. We are worthy as we are, just as we are, and we're enough. And I just wanted to do something, and I didn't know what I would do. But I couldn't stay quiet with it. It was this hunger in me that I need to do something about this. So I was getting my top student award one day, and I gave that speech that I practiced. My friend's mom used to write this blog in Express Tribune, that Pakistani online paper that a lot of people follow. And she came up to me and she's like, I'd love to write about you. And I thought, I'd done some community, like university media because of my big scholarship win. So I was like, yeah, sure, I can talk about it, about my scholarship. She's like, no, I don't want to talk about the scholarship. I want to talk about your story. And initially my reaction was, oh my God, no, it's so shameful. I don't want to wash my dirty laundry in public. Like, it's too traumatic and all of that. And my daughter was standing right beside me, listening to me say that. And she was 11. And she said, Mom, if every woman thinks it's too shameful and traumatic, then how will this change? I think you should talk about it. So I did. And the blog got published on my convocation day, June 10th of 2013. I got my degree in the morning, already a very emotional moment for me. Came home, logged into my social media, and it was flooded with thousands and thousands of messages from women all over the world, thanking me for breaking the silence, congratulating me, telling me, one message was, I was about to kill myself today and your message came to me, your story came to me at the right time. Thank you for speaking up. I'm going through this too. I started having coffees with women in the local community, like here in Mississauga. There was one woman I started mentoring in Waterloo. She reached out to me and she's like, can I just talk to you on Skype? And I said, sure. And she started telling me about what she's going through. It was like, oh my God, this is me 5 years ago. I can't let this happen. So I drove to Waterloo the next day, spent the entire day with her, just held her hand, told her she deserves better. And then eventually, 3 weeks later, as I was shopping in Walmart, she messages me that I'm now enrolling myself into a master's program and I'm going to change my life. And today, She is done with her master's. She's now doing her MBA at Ivy, actually, and she's happier than ever before. But there were so many others like that, and I just sort of got hooked. There's no other word for it. Like, I got hooked. I just started doing whatever I could. So I would go to like small community events and say, can you please give me the mic for 5 minutes? There might be one woman in the audience who needs to hear what I have to say. So all on my own time, on my own cost, I had a bank job and I was doing all of this. And I just started like writing blogs or like doing little articles or whatever I could do to inspire and help people and help women believe in themselves. And just kept doing it for years, and it's sort of little victories and little snowballs. One event would lead to another. And then in 2017, I got approached by Toronto Life magazine. The editor there had read something I'd written somewhere, and she said, we'd love to share your story as a full feature memoir. That memoir became the #1 article of the year, which led to my book deal, and now the book is being made into a film, and I'm working on my second book. But the purpose and the why behind it remains the same. Maybe there's one more person that I can help. My why is that man who wrote to me from Pakistan, from Karachi, and said, I have a 17-year-old daughter. Her marriage is fixed for next month, and I've decided to cancel her wedding and send her to school after reading the story. My why is that woman who wrote to me a few months ago and said, my husband will not allow me to buy your book, so I'm hiding in my local library to read a little bit every day. Or that young girl who writes to me and says, you gave me the power to believe in my dreams. And that is what fuels me and keeps me going. But there's, through this journey of doing this work for the past 6-7 years now, and it has taken me all across the country, and I've branched into different topics that are resilience and mental health focused and all of that. One of the things that I have learned is that violence against women is not unique to our culture. It's a universal thing. 1 in 3 women in Canada will have suffered from violence at some point in their lives. There are 12 million girls every year who are being forced into underage marriages around the world, every year. There are 1 in 2 women will have suffered from some kind of physical or sexual harassment, either at work or family or somewhere. So that means that there are women right now in this audience that I'm talking to who know what I'm talking about. So how are we going to change this, right? So there's a universality to the truth that, yeah, it happens across the world, but then there are also intersectionalities. Not every woman faces abuse the same way. Not every woman faces those same barriers. A white woman leaves an abusive marriage. More often than not, she will find some support. People will say, why are you staying with him? Leave. He's an abuser. What do we face? Ridicule and shame and stigma. And we're told, my brother-in-law called me and said, what's the point of you winning all these awards and scholarships if you failed at the real purpose of being a woman? Shame on you. That's what we face. And that's why it's important, essential for us to break that silence, for the millions of silences that are still waiting to be broken. Because when we are silent, we are actually on the side of the oppressor. When we brush these issues under the rug, we don't want to talk about it, it's family stuff, don't wash your dirty laundry in public, all those kind of things. I face a lot of backlash. I get hate messages that, I get hate messages from men, and mostly women, because we are used to living in a system of misogyny and patriarchy. So any woman who chooses to speak up and do something differently, there must be something wrong with her. Because the pressure to conform is there. And if we always stay silent, we are allies to abuse. Because silence is the biggest ally to abuse. And unless we break that silence and more people speak up, things aren't going to change. We need to normalize these conversations and bring them out from under the rug and from behind closed family doors. We need to define a woman's honor not by her marital status or the way she dresses or any of that thing or the role she serves, but her honor lies in her freedom to be herself, to be respected for who she is as a person, her individuality, her dreams and her goals. She needs to define that, and we need to support her instead of treating her as some kind of charity case. And, when Zena said in her speech about being proactive, that's something that I have now made it a personal mission of mine. Because like I've been mentoring dozens of women, and I have a nonprofit startup which is a mentorship program to help abuse survivors build better lives after escaping. Because what I realized was a lot of women go back and fall into the same abuse patterns because they get out of it, and now they're faced with intimidation and isolation, and oh my God, how do I get a bank account? How do I get a car fixed? How do I get a social support system? They feel isolated. They're rejected from their families. I tried to leave 4 or 5 times, and I went back. The last time that I didn't go back was because I was a student at UTM, and they gave me that community, and I shuddered. Like if I didn't have that, I would have gone back. But not every woman has that, right? So we need one person to show us and believe in us, because that teaches us to believe in ourselves. Even one person who believes in you can be a life changer. And you can be that for other people who you see around you. Random moments of kindness go a long, long way. You know, like that man in Tim Hortons, or somebody, or my professor at university who just had some motivational conversations with me out of the goodness of his heart. Because those moments of kindness show those victims that they're not invisible and they're not alone. It instills hope. It gives a little bit ray of sunshine into that dark box of abuse that they're living in. So we need to do that as a community. And that's something we can all do. We all know someone in our family, in our community, or somewhere. And if we start talking about it, we'll get to know more people. So that's important. And that's why I started Brave Beginnings, which is my nonprofit, which is a mentorship program. We match survivors of abuse with mentors who then help them build better lives after escaping violence. But whether it's shelters, whether it's the mentorship program that I'm offering, whether it's counseling or anything, these are all reactive things, right? So how are we going to teach our children? The change starts with our kids, with our youth. A lot of times women, I work very closely with Assaulted Women's Helpline now with my advocacy, and the largest number of calls that they get is women calling and saying, he doesn't hit me, but is this abuse? We don't even recognize psychological and emotional abuse. Because we're not taught to. Like abuse, when we Google abuse or violence against women, you see bruised faces and broken bones, right? So what about those women? What about the time, if let's say my husband hadn't tried to kill me, or he hadn't slapped me, would that have made the marriage less abusive? No, because abuse messes with your brain. It's all about power and control. It's about his need to feel powerful by controlling me. And it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with the victims. It has everything to do with the abusers themselves. So we don't even know that as women. What is psychological and emotional abuse? We're being called, like if we ever speak up that, he calls me bad words. Oh, come on, it's just words. The words don't hurt. Words hurt more than anything. My ex-husband abused me sexually, physically, in every way. But the scars that I still carry and deal with are the words. When I go into a board meeting at work, and now I'm, a director at a big bank, but I still have to battle that in my head. No, I'm worthy of this. I know I can do this. It's almost like negating and undoing the damage, unlearning all the things that abuse taught me. And we need to teach our young girls, our women, what are those early signs of abusive behavior? So if he's saying these bad words to you, I can guarantee you that at some point, maybe years down the road, that slap will come. Because abuse is not about, a switch that goes on and off. It's a symptom of underlying personality traits that are deep-rooted flaws and deep-rooted misogyny and patriarchy that has been brewing for generations. And we need to speak up about those things. We need to educate ourselves and our girls on early signs of abusive behavior, what their rights are, what their legal rights are. I thought for 10 years in my marriage, I thought that if I left, I would be deported because he sponsored me. And I know now that's not true, but that's what was told to me, and I had no way of knowing better. And when I put that out as a tweet, I had so many women write to me that, yeah, we believe that too. So, we need to learn about that. I often describe abuse as, if you put a frog in boiling hot water, the frog will jump out and run away. But you put the frog in cold water and you turn the heat up ever so slightly, the frog's body temperature keeps adjusting to the heating water, and the frog will eventually cook to death without even realizing it. And that's what it is. It's insidious. It progresses. It creeps up on you. And you don't even realize what's happening. So when, initially, if somebody in the street comes and slaps you, you'll be like, reporting him and whatever and go away. But if you're with that person and they're starting off in very loving ways, because it is very loving, and those little things are happening in the background, and over the years that same person will slap you and you will take it because you think you deserved it. And that's where the education piece comes in. It's a big gap in all communities, but especially our community, because we want to brush these issues under the rug, and we want to bury our heads in the sand, and we don't want to talk about it. So it's important to learn and educate. And the big important thing that I needed, when I wrote my book, I had a few priorities, and the biggest aim that I had with my book was to make sure the universality of abuse is addressed, but then also the cultural shame and stigma is brought up. But more importantly, to answer the question for people that why women stay. Because it's very easy for somebody who's not been abused to say, oh, why doesn't she leave? But how are you supposed to leave when you don't have any idea where your next meal is going to come from? How are you supposed to leave when you think your father will never talk to you, or worse yet, he'll die of a heart attack from shame? How are you supposed to leave when your own parents tell you that you will be not worthy of any love or respect? How are you supposed to leave when older married men think it's okay to sexually harass you because you're now damaged goods and used property, and you carry the label of single mother like a bad word? And those things need to change. We need to change those things by dialogue. We need to break that silence. We need to change the stigma, and we need to teach our girls that they are worthy as they are. And if that's one thing I can instill on my daughters, my job as a mother is done. And lastly, I will point out to the very, very crucial and important role of men in this dialogue. And I'm so heartwarmed to see several men sitting in the audience today, because this is not a men versus women fight. You guys are fathers. You guys are brothers, sons, husbands. This is a gender equity fight. This is us against abuse, not against each other. So I have been very fortunate that most of my mentors have been male. I'm very fortunate to have very healthy friends in my life right now that are men, that give me that hope that yes, there are amazing men out there. But we need you guys to be more vocal too. We need you to be there as allies. We need you to be there standing shoulder to shoulder with us and fighting for this. We need you to be that man who wrote to me from Pakistan and sent his daughters to school. So I thank you for all the men in the room right now for being here to support us and and enable this dialogue to happen, because we deserve a world. Our children deserve a world where they can live truly and show up as who they are, with love and respect, where they do not have to fear that they might be abused at the next corner. They might be molested at the next corner. Their loving husband who showers them with love and affection could slap them the next day. None of us deserve to be loved that way. And it's up to us, all of us, to create that world. Thank you.